Hi everybody, it's Kerry Stead, aka Melbourne Games Coach, coming to you from the 2013 Australian Open Chess Championships being played at North in Cammeray in Sydney. This video is going to look at the round 1 action from the other day. Don't forget, of course, the sponsors for the event: Hancock Prospecting, North Leagues, Ridges North Sydney, Australian Chess Enterprises and Chess Discount Sales. So we go, board 1 here. Grandmaster Igor Kenkin against Ken Holt. Board 2, Richard Lilly against Grandmasters on One Zhao. Board 3, Grandmaster Daryl Johansson against Nicholas Dean Cowell. And Board 4, Bert Neudel against International Master Morton Lai. Over on Board 6 here we have Philip Drew playing International Master Max Illingworth. Board 7, International Master George Z playing Anthony Pickering. And Board 8, Van Ensel playing Women's Grandmaster Irene Sikander. That Board 8 game between Ensel and Sikander was actually one of the upsets of round 1, with Ensel holding Sikander to a draw. And you can see here from the shots of the playing hall that there's plenty of room for both players as well as spectators looking to view the games, whether it be players in between moves or people who've come in to watch the action themselves. We've got 175 players across all events, 112 in the Open, 50 in the minor and 13 in the classic, which makes for a pretty good tournament all round. You're more than welcome to come down and check it out in Cammeray. Again, in a couple of rounds time we'll have Grandmaster Ian Rogers doing live commentary at the venue. Also, don't forget to check out everything online. The websites are about to come up, northsydneychess.org being the main one, and don't forget my blog, melbournegamescoach.blogspot.com. Thanks. Having a look at some of the games from round 1, we're going to start with one of the upsets from the first round between Greg Canfield and Lachlan James. This is the position from their game just before the time control. Lachlan's just played bishop takes f6, and the big problem for Greg in this position is the fact that a lot of his pieces are really tied down to defending the problem knight here on c2, and because of that it's really difficult for his pieces to get out and develop those, particularly those rooks on a1 and c1. In this position, Greg decided to play bishop to g6, and this is where we can start to see some of the difficulty that Greg has in trying to untangle his position. Lachlan played the logical knight c6, and Greg responded with queen d3. Again, looks like a fairly sensible move. Again, it also threatens the knight on h7, and a very logical defensive move, queen to g8, which obviously defends the knight, but also, more importantly, pins that bishop on g6. Greg played a logical response, played knight e5, trying to trade off that knight, but Lachlan again played the correct move here and took with the bishop. Greg recaptured with the d-pawn, obviously the issue being that it's no good for him taking with the f-pawn because he can't actually activate those rooks, so he's actually looking for pawn breaks rather than piece play in this position. And this is where the real dilemma of Greg's position can be seen. Lachlan played the simple knight e7, and Greg really is in a world of trouble. It's very, very difficult to do anything with the pin on the g-file, which is always going to create a problem with that bishop. So this g-file pin is a big problem, and it's really difficult to try and alleviate that pressure. One possible option that Greg might have been able to try, if he tries bishop to h4, Lachlan can simply take on g6. After recapturing with the pawn, then he's playing bishop e8, and again that pin is going to be a huge problem. And the big issue is again that these pieces and the rooks on the queen side really can't do anything. What Greg ended up playing in this position was bishop to g3, again to try and break that pin. The issue now is that he has two bishops that are effectively pinned, and after a simple move like knight f8, the pressure on g6 is simply too much. Greg tried knight to d4, try and activate that knight and potentially untangle some of those rooks, but simply taking on g6 twice returns the material, and with a big attack. Obviously the rooks on b file, and particularly the rook on b2, are much stronger than those poor rooks on a1 and c1 that Greg's suffering with. Try the pawn break f5, but after knight f4 it's really difficult for Greg to find a defence, particularly when he's running short of time. He tried rook f3, sorry, queen f3, but rook g2 is very difficult to meet. Obviously if the king moves either to f1 or to h1, then simply queen can take the bishop on g3, picks up a piece, and should be enough to win the game. Greg tried giving up the queen for the 2 pieces. However, after rook b2 he actually ended up losing on time in this position, but the difficulty is that regardless of where he moves his king, he's basically getting mated. So a very good win for Lachlan James, that one, over Greg Canfield, and a bit of a surprise. The next game we're going to have a look at is one of the quicker games in the tournament, this one between Passan Pereira and Ray Yang. A fairly nondescript opening by Passan, and it really didn't seem to be going very far early on, until Passan played f4. Ray played a logical move, taking on d4 and queen b6. King h1 and king h8 are both reasonably sensible moves, and then c3 to defend the d4 pawn. Ray played knight d7, which on the surface looks like a very logical move, trying to once again attack that central knight on e5. And Passan played the fairly innocuous looking rook f3, but there's actually a fair bit of venom in that move. And it can be seen after Ray's next move, which was quite a serious blunder. He actually played pawn to f6. Probably a better move might have been pawn to f5 to rook h3, and all of a sudden the king's in a huge amount of danger. Ray decided to try and take the pawn, but simply rook h7 and queen h5, and there's no way to stop the checkmate. So after pawn takes f4, Passan just had the checkmate with rook h8, and again a surprisingly quick game from what looked like a reasonably balanced position after 10 or so moves. And the final game that I was going to have a look at, something of a theme for the day, was the Grunfeld defence. On the top boards, 3 of the top 4 boards that all went live online all featured Grunfeld defences of one form or another. We had the Grunfeld employed by Zhongwan Zhao and Molten Lai, and played against Daryl Johansson on board 3. So this is obviously a very standard position here, and Frank decides to play knight f3. Probably a little bit less common. Probably a move like bishop e3 or bishop c4 is more usual, either to try and overprotect the d4 pawn or to try and get the king out of the centre as quickly as possible. And again, the thematic break here is pawn to c5 for black. Frank tried bishop b5 check, which on the surface looks like it is going to be a useful move, but all it actually does is help black's cause. After knight to c6, Frank castled, Peng Yu swapped the central pawns and then castled himself, and this is where the pressure against d4 is really very difficult to stop. Bishop came to e3 to try and defend it, and Peng Yu simply tried to undermine one of the defenders with bishop g4. Frank took on c6 to try and alleviate some of that pressure, and here to try and stop something, he really has to play a move like e5, which is a major concession in the centre. However, he played queen c2. On the surface, it looks like it simply swaps off a few pieces and might allow white to defend pretty logically, but Peng Yu in this case sold the bishop for the knight on f3, then captured on d4, and after the exchanges and taking on c6, simply rook c8. And even though obviously materially this ending is equal, the activity of the black pieces means that black definitely has the better of this ending. Frank tried queen to b7, but after queen f6 we can see that already Pengu has some serious pressure against the f3 pawn. Frank tried rook d1, queen takes the pawn f3 and rook c1 to try and swap off some of those rooks. Really didn't help the cause because of a move like rook b8, again forcing the queen out of the way with tempo. Obviously if the queen really wants to stay on b7 if it can, if it takes the pawn on e7 then the rook comes down to the second rank and there's all sorts of pressure there, possibly even a rook b5 and swinging, or rook b4 and swinging across to the king side, as we'll see a little bit later in the game. Ultimately Frank took an a7 and that was the pretty much the end of the game. After taking on e4, the final mistake was playing rook c to e1. The big issue being that now the king really is stuck. So after queen g4, king h1 and queen f3, obviously the king's got nowhere to go, and simply rook b4 is going to pick up quite a bit of material, if not the house. So Frank resigned in something of an interesting day for the Grunfeld, something that's very fashionable at the higher levels, and obviously, as you can see by this game, is also played at the general club level. Obviously Pengu's a pretty decent junior, coming in just over 2100, but Frank's a sort of 1700 rated club player. So it's a type of opening that does get employed both at the top level and at club level, and so interesting to see how potent it can be. Hopefully you've enjoyed having this quick look at the round 1 games and a bit of a recap of what's happened, and hopefully you'll keep watching these videos in the future. Thanks.